Hi everyone, it's Zoe here, and here obviously with Jo. And today we want to share with you some questions for your question bank, but specifically around emotions. It's an area Jo and I are really passionate about in coaching, and it's something we notice that coaches, leaders, professionals from all areas really struggle to ask questions about emotions and really welcome emotion into the space in a safe way, to help people to unpack what is going on for them at any one particular time, where emotion comes up in a conversation. So we've got some 10 questions for you that you can use in coaching style conversations to help people unpack their emotions. So do you want to kick off, Jo?
Sure, yeah. So I think before you ask the questions, you also need to check in with your own emotions. So, how are you feeling? Because when you ask these questions, you really need to center yourself around a calm, curious, non-judgmental, patient, open kind of emotional state yourself. Calm your breathing down. So some of the questions that you can ask are simple but quite powerful questions like, what are you feeling right now? So you might have asked another question, as part of the conversation, and maybe they've been talking about what they're thinking, and you're noticing that they're sharing a lot of thought-based kind of dialogue, and you're curious about the emotions. So what are you feeling right now?
Yeah.
And you need to then be able to hold the silence and allow that person to kind of go within themselves and actually really connect with, actually, how am I feeling? Because if they're very head based, it's going to take them a bit of time to go down through that. And if they answer with, I don't know, as a coach, it's obviously important not to panic, to be comfortable with the uncomfortable feeling that your client might be experiencing. And you can just reassure them and say, that's okay, take your time.
I would build on that and encourage you to notice, do they answer the question? Because often if you've had someone in a headspace and they're doing lots of thinking and you ask them, what are you feeling right now? They'll come back with more thinking. And if that happens and what you're getting is something other than emotion, then ask the question again. So I acknowledge that you're thinking about how busy you are and how things are. How are you feeling right now? And emphasize the word feeling so it really lands. And again, giving that space.
And they'll also often answer with, I think I'm feeling, which is just so interesting. Like that, I think I'm feeling is not a definite, is it? It's kind of like saying, I might be feeling without actually fully connecting with that emotion. So it's a very different thing to say, I am feeling excited, or I'm feeling nervous, or I'm feeling frustrated, whatever the emotion might be. So the power of these questions is also dependent on what you hear and what you follow up with in those questions. So number one is, what are you feeling right now?
Yeah. Number two is, where are you feeling that? So if somebody follows up with, right, what I'm feeling is nervousness or excitement, I think the two examples you gave, you can follow it with, well, where are you feeling that? Like, where is that in your body? And the reason why we would ask this sort of question, again, is, as Jo mentioned, connecting with that feeling is really important. One of the reasons we get stuck in our emotions is because we don't fully make contact with them. And so to enable the emotions to kind of pass through and to learn from them, we need to make full contact with them. So asking your client or the person you're discussing it with where they are feeling that emotion gives them another sensory check, really, about how they're experiencing that emotion in their body.
Yeah, lots of people don't necessarily recognize their emotions. So that sometimes people will say, I don't actually know what it feels like to feel that. So actually being able to connect with where do you feel it in your body can help them to recognize it when they feel it again. And then when they feel it again, they think, I know what that is. And then start to self-coach around, right, what do I want to do with that? What does that emotion need?
Yeah.
So the third question is, does it have a shape or a size? So if somebody says, I'm feeling that in my tummy, how big is that feeling? Like, is it taking up the whole of their tummy? Does it feel like it is a small ball shape? Like often people will be able to give it a color as well. Is it a hard ball? Is it malleable? So they're starting to just really get to learn more about their emotions. And that's where you might also lean into a metaphor. Because often they'll then start to say, it's like a red ball, like those ones that, when you play snooker, or it's like a box, it's got a lock on it, and then you can start to ask questions related to the metaphor, but cover metaphor in another lesson.
Yeah. Again, the reason why we do this is often it's hard for people to find a language to talk about emotions. And so if you're using a language which is describing the emotion as a thing, like as a shape, as a size, as a color, you are processing the emotion, but in a very safe way. So you're not asking them to divulge all the reasons why that emotion is there, but you are helping them to make contact with that emotion and to help it to pass through. So that's why we would ask that one. So the fourth question is, if this emotion had a message for you, what would that message be? So often with emotions, what we try to do is to rush them through, or to avoid them, or to push them away, or hide them under rugs and things. When emotions are information, so often in the process of being able to avoid those emotions, we miss the learning, we miss the message that it's trying to give us. And so this question gets right to the point. So somebody says, I'm feeling really nervous. And usually your approach to nervousness might be just to like hide it, push it away, push it to one side. Instead, you lean into it and you ask, so if that nervousness had a message, what would that message be? And it might be, I need to make sure I'm prepared, or I need to make sure that I spend some time relaxing before I go and do X, Y, Z. So we're looking to really decode the emotion and understand what the learning is from within it.
Yeah, and question number 5 is, are there any other feelings that are relevant? So what we're doing is we're just, as the coaches, is we're asking questions that our coachee probably won't ask themselves. So it's getting them to kind of search, do that internal search into places that they perhaps haven't thought of before. And they might say, well, yeah, I mean, I'm feeling nervous now, but I think there's also excitement that's present. Okay, and then you might explore that and say, what's the relationship between the excitement and the nervousness? And you can build on your questions from that.
Yeah, and again, the reason for this is often emotions hide each other. So it might start with, I'm feeling really angry, and you explore the anger. But actually what's beneath the anger is actually sadness, and so it's being able to honor all of the experiences that your client is having. Okay, so that was, are there any other feelings that are relevant? So that leads nicely actually into the next question, which is, are there any emotions that you're not honoring, or are there any feelings that you're not honoring? And this is a great question for the client who is used to being strong. And we call that emotional stonewalling, where those emotions just locked away and like, I'm fine, everything's good. So if you have a client who's showing up to the session and they're talking a lot about the different challenges that are going on in their life, but you're not seeing any emotion, this is a great question. Like, are there any emotions here that you're not honoring? It might be that client's feeling particularly vulnerable, but they haven't actually made contact with that yet. So exploring not just the emotions that are there, but the emotions that actually aren't there is a really important piece of work in coaching.
And they might respond and say, what do you mean by that? Or actually, I don't think I honor any of my emotions. And then all of a sudden you have this new piece of work that you can kind of connect and work together on. So the question 7 is, what emotions do you get stuck with or stuck in? Because I often will use the metaphor of like our emotions, many emotions we experience throughout any given day, running past you in like a river in front of you. And sometimes they'll get caught in a like kind of riverbed or in a, an experience, and then they'll actually, wash out again after an hour, let's say. But others get really stuck for a long time. So this is a question that's also really touching upon patterns that your client might experience with their emotions. So your client might say, loneliness. I feel lonely a lot. So that might be an answer to that question around what emotions do you get stuck with or in. And then you can start to do some work around that. And that might be new information for your client because they might not have thought about kind of getting stuck with them. And then question 8 is, what is the relationship between your thinking, your feeling, and your behavior? So it's a very open question. Your client could say anything to any of these questions, actually, and that's the purpose of them, so that they can share with you what they need to share with you. And that relationship between thinking, feeling, and behavior is related to cognitive behavioral coaching, that kind of theory, but also what's the sequencing of a person's kind of emotional processing. So do they have certain thoughts attached to certain emotions, which then lead to a certain behavior? And does that work for them? Or if it's not working, how would they like to change that in so that it does help them to move forward in a way that they would like to?
Yeah. And then the next question introduces the concept of choice. So up until now, we're kind of exploring different emotions and how the client's feeling. But, it's important to talk about, how does the client want to feel? So often when we're setting goals and talking about different experiences, we're talking about how they would like something to be or what they would like to do. Let's not miss out, how would you like to feel about this situation? So perhaps you're talking about a relationship. Well, how would you like to feel in this relationship? Or a particular situation that you're working on together. How would you like to feel in this situation? And once you're able to identify how that client would like to feel, you can then work back from that to be, okay, if that's how you want to feel, how do you need to think about it? And in order to think about that, what are some of the behaviors that you need to be doing? So again, as Jo's just described, they're bringing in that cognitive behavioral coaching approach to link those things together. So I think that takes us up to 9. So what have you got left for us, Jo?
That was a bonus one, because I think that's really is part of question 8 about exploring the relationship between thinking, feeling, and behaviour. So question 9 is, how do you express or release your emotions? So some people keep their emotions really tight within themselves, and then at a certain point in time, they might kind of erupt out of them in a way that they hadn't predicted and they hadn't desired. Other people will express their emotions easily, in the moment when they're experiencing them. But there's a whole range of different ways to express emotions or release emotions between those two, perhaps more extremes. But just getting people to think about, again, more about their relationship with their emotions. And if you think about emotions as energy, that energy needs to move. And doesn't want to be stuck. So that expression or the releasing of it is an important part of emotional agility, emotional intelligence, whatever label you would like to put on it.
Yeah, which I guess brings us to the last one, similar to that last question there, which is just how comfortable are you with your emotions? And this is a great contracting question, actually. If you're setting up your relationship, talking about the work that you're going to be doing together, to explore that. So how comfortable are you with your emotions? How much does that want to feature in our work together? Is a great way to create a safe space for exploration of all sorts of topics. So 10 questions on different ways to explore emotions with your clients. I hope this gives you some confidence that you can work with emotion in a very safe, ethical way in a coaching space. And that when emotion presents itself in the coaching relationship, which it will do because we are all humans and we all have emotions, they will come up. Have the courage to lean into them using questions like these and share with us, what are your questions? Which ones do you like and what do you use?
Yeah, and also we know that coaches, have that desire to build coaching banks. So if you'd like us to share with you questions on other topics, just leave us a comment under this video. We do read them and we'll be able to do something for you. If you want to connect with us in other ways, you can join our Coaching Crowd Facebook group, which is free for coaches and aspiring coaches. Or you're also invited to visit our website, www.igcompany.co.uk. Thanks for watching.